in Taiwan. 我今天speak on behalf of American Chamber, so allow me to use English to do my very short presentation. I want to just give you 5 government agencies. Like this afternoon, we will have one with at the Jinguanhui. So that's throughout the year. We will continue to advocate. Of course, when the new issues coming up, we will add it to our advocacy efforts. So, without further ado, I'd like to invite our chairman, Bill Weissman, the managing partners of McKinsey, to come to give everybody.
I try to confuse my audience as much as possible. Thanks, Andrea. And let me get it very nicely. So, okay. So the theme this year is locking in the future. Another way to think of this is how do we achieve full benefit over what the government has put in place in the last year. But how do we lock in the future? Taiwan has come back out of the global economic recession, global economic crisis, resurgent. Was able to sign ECFA, take massive advantage of that, and let's see how we can take that forward in the future. We have a few recommendations. Okay, that should do it. All right. So what I'm going to talk about is a little bit of current business environment. We're going to talk a little bit about requests of the U.S. government, status of previous white paper issues, and some sector-specific positions, which will be shared by the committee co-chairs and representatives here today. So, as Andrea mentioned, our white paper is a compendium of 20 subcommittee papers, 20 committee papers. We've got 2 papers from non-committee members, including chiropractic and tobacco organizations. We identified 94 separate issues, or over 200 if you count all the sub-issues. I'm going to go through a little bit of numbers around resolution rates here. So if you look back to the 2010 white paper we presented last June, 2 issues have been solved. So that means conclusive action has been taken on behalf of the government, and these are no longer seen as a problem. 12 are in progress, meaning that there isn't a ministerial staff working on this particular issue, and it's receiving satisfactory follow-up. 37 of the issues are under observation, 50 are stalled and not making any substantial progress, and 13 of our issues have been dropped, meaning that we don't see them as issues anymore. They're not a committee priority. So I want to comment a bit on the 2 that were solved. So 2 that were solved. Let me talk about the second one first. So the chemical manufacturers, the chemical committee, basically scored a victory here because international standards will now be applied to the inspection of high-pressure containers. We're going to come back to this as a thematic issue around Taiwan-specific or Taiwan-unique solutions for regulation. But the chemicals committee was very happy to celebrate this. The banking committee, depending on how you interpret it, foreign banks are to some extent exempt from thin capitalization regulation, meaning that they're able to take larger advantage of the balance sheets that they have overseas in order to make loans here in Taiwan. This has not been completely settled. The AmCham Banking Committee sees it as resolved, but the Joint Banking Committee with other foreign chambers of commerce does not. So it remains to be seen. So let's take a look at a macro view. So if we compare progress, and the metric we're using here is just how many issues got resolved, right, and how many issues have been seeing satisfactory follow-up. If you look back in history, we've seen rates of around 40% trending down now to 12%. Okay, so what we're talking about here is how many of our issues in a given year have seen satisfactory follow-up or resolution. And we've seen a drop, and we saw a massive drop this year. Now, you could explain that in any way. You could say the government's busy trying to manage growth. We applaud that. The government's busy trying to get ECFA beyond the early harvest list. We also applaud that. Well, we've got issues that we need resolved. We see open doors, but we haven't seen enough action. We'd like to see more. So to support that, what we did this year is we put together something called the early action list. So for early action, this is one issue per committee that they raised to say, what can you get resolved in the short term? Because we want the government to take action. A lot of time, the issues we just the growth, where did that growth come from? 47% of it came from China, including Hong Kong. 12% of it came from the US, and the rest came from the rest of the world. If you look at where the G20's import growth came from, Okay, so this is where Taiwan is shipping product, where that growth went. If you look at the imports from the G20, who is importing? Well, 25% of the import growth in 2010 came from China. 19% came from the U.S., 56% came from the rest of the world. So what you'd like to see is a more balanced picture here. Right now, we're almost doubly dependent on China than economic growth dictates. Now, obviously, given proximity to China and given the fact that everyone in Taiwan speaks Chinese, this makes sense. Okay? But we're saying we've got to go and lock in, as Korea is doing, some kind of trade agreements with the U.S. and with the EU, because that's where, come on, we're under-delivering on the U.S. The U.S. is hungry for imports, and we're under-delivering on that. We've got to make that up.